Lots of questions ahead for the NBA's Eastern Conference this offseason. Plus, does Pete Rose deserve to be reinstated? Hey, everyone, and welcome to Front Office Sports Today from FOS Studios here in New York City. I'm Baker Machado.
And I'm Renee Washington, and thank you guys so much for joining us. Each and every weekday, we're chatting the biggest stories happening in the business and culture of sports. But we've got a big show. Let's jump right into the shoot-around.
Yes, indeed. And let's start with big news in the NFL, Renee. We're going to be getting one tasty matchup this Thanksgiving, as CBS announced that the Cowboys are going to face the Kansas City Chiefs in that traditional holiday home game in Dallas. This comes ahead of the NFL announcing their full schedule of games on Wednesday night. So, Renee, this means the Chiefs not only are going to be playing on Thanksgiving, but also Christmas as well. So every holiday starts with the Chiefs, I guess.
Yeah, we may not know where Aaron Rodgers will be playing this season, but we do know where I'll be sitting as I'm eating my turkey, booing the Cowboys. Now, I will say this is two of the most watched teams in the NFL. Last season specifically, of course, the Lions had the highest viewership, but the Chiefs and the Cowboys were right there, 2 and 3. Cowboys were tied with the Ravens for third. And so you get the viewership, even though the Cowboys, not a great team on the field, they draw a lot of fans. Whether you're hating them or loving them, you watch them.
Yep.
But then also you have Tyler, Texas native, Texas Tech alum in Mahomes returning back for the first time ever to Arlington, Texas in his pro career. So you're going to get a lot of excitement around this Thanksgiving Day game.
And of course, the Chiefs also part of that big first game for YouTube as well. That's going to be in Sao Paulo, Brazil. You'd have to think almost that's going to break every record imaginable because that game's going to be free.
New haircut, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are bringing the ratings, okay?
Meanwhile, sticking with the NFL, there is some drama over in Cincy. That is one of the Bengals' best players, all-pro defensive end Trey Hendrickson, telling reporters he's not going to step on the field for the team this season unless he gets a new contract. Head coach Zach Taylor told him apparently that he would be fined if he doesn't appear during minicamp, and that starts in just 4 weeks. So Renee, Hendrickson says the lack of communication, which we hear that often with Bengals players from the team, about his new deal has now turned personal because of all of this.
Yeah, he even said that text message from Coach Zach Taylor made him think they're not in a rush to get this done before that mid-June date they have to report. But as you talk about, the lack of communication has him worried. We're talking about the reigning sacks leader for the NFL last season, and coming off of what the Bengals already have been able to lock in. You had T. Higgins, who got a 4-year, $115 million extension. Jamar Chase, which, by the way, that extension took some time too.
Right.
Jamar Chase, a historic 4-year extension, worth $161 million. So you're now having your sacks leader who's like, what about me? How am I going to get paid? Now his base salary, $15.8 million, is significantly under what others across the league in terms of sack artists are getting paid. So he deserves to get paid more, and seems like he's ready for anything, whether it gets done or no deal happens. He seems like he's prepared for whatever.
Totally, and it looks like we got a runway of about 4 weeks to figure out what happens. Look, this is not the first time we've had a holdout, not potentially attend minicamp and all that stuff, but still.
Real quick note, others in his position are getting $30 million plus annually compared to his 15.8. So significant difference for a guy that showed you on the field what he's worth.
Well, and also when you think for the Bengals, when you've got Higgins, Chase, him, quarterback Joe Burrow, there's a lot of big contracts on that team already.
Exactly.
All right, meanwhile, we now know who won't be buying the NBA's Portland Trail Blazers, and that's Nike co-founder and Oregon mega donor Phil Knight. He says that while he had made an offer to buy the Blazers a few years ago for about $2 billion, he's no longer interested in getting the team. The estate of current owner Paul Allen says that they plan to put the Blazers up for sale. Forbes lists the team value at about $3.5 billion. That's about 22nd in the league, but it makes you think, if Phil Knight's not going to buy the Blazers, I mean, who else is that legendary in Oregon that would even want them?
I know. It's been a long process since 2018 when Allen passed away. And for Phil Knight, he said 5 years ago when he was younger, he was willing to buy them, as you mentioned, for that $2 billion. So it is interesting. This is a team that back in '88 was worth $70 million. Obviously, that's jumped substantially over the decades. And it's just been an ever-wondering question of like, what's going to happen with the Trailblazers. Of course, it is important to note, with all this about them being up for sale, the Seahawks, we're still not sure the timeline for them. And then also even for the 25% stake that the Allen family has, their estate has, I should say, in the MLS Seattle Sounders, no mention of that. So it honestly just leaves us more questions than anything around what's going to happen for Portland. And unfortunately, on the court, they're dealing with issues of what's going to happen with their future, but also financially of who's even going to own them.
Yeah, and like we see with a lot of, especially tech billionaires, Paul Allen's estate wants all of that money from the sale of the Blazers to go to his philanthropic
it is one of the largest
efforts.
estates in American history, so not easy to figure out the planning around that, but we'll stay tuned on that one.
Meanwhile, the NBA Eastern Conference heading into the offseason, we're learning a little bit more about the extent of Jayson Tatum's injury. That is, the Celtics are on the brink of elimination against the Knicks. Meanwhile, another Eastern Conference team was eliminated from the playoffs, that being the Cavs, and they enter the offseason with a lot of questions as well. So let's take a look at this in our main event. So, Renee, obviously a lot of uncertainty for the Eastern Conference next year. Obviously what the Celtics and even the Cavs now are going to look like. Plus, where does Giannis go in all this? But let's start with Jayson Tatum. He had successful surgery on that ACL tear yesterday. We knew that this was going to be a very big deal for the injury for next year because it likely is going to sideline him for most, if not all, of next year. And the Celtics are entering the offseason with a lot of questions of big salaries on their roster. And now we know the Cavs probably are entering in the same position.
Yeah, Achilles tear at that, not ACL. Achilles is such a terrible injury to recover from. You've got Tatum, who's on that $315 million deal with the Celtics through 2030. And now your superstar, who was top 5 in MVP voting this year, is out for, forget just this playoffs, but probably most, if not all, of next season as well. So it definitely leads you to wonder, you just signed into the richest contract in NBA history when it happened, and now he's not going to be on the court. And so I know there's been a lot of questions, especially off of Damian Lillard's Achilles, and now you've got Jayson Tatum. In terms of Achilles tears specifically, but also injuries for the NBA, the impact on should there be less games? Should there be more load management? Whatever questions are now circulating around this, because this is not just impacting the Celtics. This impacts the NBA. That one of the faces of the league, one of the best players in the league,
in his prime.
is out. In his prime, is out for the foreseeable future. On top of, we already have been talking about what's going to happen with the Celtics once they're sold. Officially, will they blow up the roster? It just leads to way more questions than anything, because this now has us thinking, and I know we've heard reports coming out, Shams being one of them, that multiple moves are expected for the Celtics, including possibly, I don't want to jump the gun here, a trade with maybe the Spurs for that number 2 pick. Questions, well, all because of this injury that it's led to.
We'll get to the Spurs and maybe what they do with some of those assets that they have. But as you mentioned, multiple pieces for the Celtics in terms of Drew Holiday. You have Kristaps Porzingis, all these other guys. With, as you mentioned, the sale, almost $6 to $7 billion. Does the new owner want to take on all of those numbers? But let's also go to the Cavs here, because the number 1 seed also enters in the offseason with a lot of questions. They will have the second or third highest, I think the third actually, highest payroll after the Suns and the Celtics heading into next year. They're $27.3 million over the 2026 luxury line, and that's only with 10 players. So that means you have all these other guys like DeAndre Hunter, who might become the most expensive 6th man on the roster. You're also already guaranteeing almost $50 million to Donovan Mitchell, $40 million to Darius Garland. Evan Mobley, because of Defensive Player of the Year, now goes from an $11 million salary to $38 million. So a lot of questions there, which then gets into a parity question. If the number 1 and number 2 seeds in the Eastern Conference can't even retain their players, and then all of a sudden the teams that can probably pick them up are all in the Western Conference where all these other good players are at, is this good for the Eastern Conference in terms of parity? Yeah,
it's unique situations. I mean, the Celtics, their starting 5 is making close to $200 million. Whereas the Cavs, the $250, I guess it was closer to. For the Cavs, you at least have a little bit more depth in terms of their top 10. But the East to West has been unique. And since 1999, the West has won 17 of the 26 available championships in that time span. But overall, it's actually been the East that's won more titles. But when you break that down in terms of all NBA players, in terms of any sort of postseason accolades, and even just the winning percentage of looking at average playoff team records, it's been highly in favor of the West. So you have this lingering question of, with the teams like the Celtics and the Cavs that are 1 and 2 in the East, eliminated and one about to be eliminated, how big of a parity is this for these two? I mean, the Bucks are a team that's out, and you have the big names for the East that are home.
Well, true. And then, one of the biggest players in the East, in Giannis, there's only a few teams, mainly in the West, being San Antonio and Houston, as you mentioned, that even have the assets to get him. So now you're thinking, and you mentioned the Celtics too, those players could be traded to San Antonio and Houston as well.
Exactly.
So
everyone's going West.
All right, guys, coming up next, our big conversation with Tim Howard from the U.S. national team, what he thinks that's happening with the MLS. That ahead on Front Office Sports Today. Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today. Now, MLS Commissioner Don Garber has talked about sustained growth for the league in the current and future Messi era. And Renee caught up with former U.S. national team goalkeeper Tim Howard to get his thoughts on it. Take a look.
Welcome back into Front Office Sports Today. I'm thrilled to have joining me the most capped goalkeeper of all time for the U.S. men's national team, former professional soccer player himself, Tim Howard, one of the GOATs, the greatest. So happy to have you here. How are you, Tim?
I'm amazing. Thank you for that intro. Happy to be with you this morning. It's a little gloomy where we are, but it's a happy day.
It is a gloomy day, but a happy day when you look at also the exciting things you've got going on. I'm curious to know about your partnership that you have with U.S. Soccer and American Airlines, of how this came about and what really drew you to want to get involved with this opportunity.
Well, two great companies that kind of are part of my world. As an American Airlines Advantage loyalty program member. Which I am, and a former U.S. soccer player. Obviously, you're never a former anything when it comes to U.S. soccer. You're always part of that family, and so the partnership for me made sense. It's the start of a long-term partnership, and to be a part of that. Getting people to games is the obvious thing, right? Because of air travel, but as well as that is the match day experience, the upgrades, seat upgrades, behind the scenes, player access, all of these things that I enjoyed as a player, right? Like all of the behind the scenes across the line type things, being able to bring that type of access to fans, to everyday fans, which they normally wouldn't get. So it's exciting for me. It's exciting because I understand what that means and what that looks like. So to be able to help provide that for fans is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and we've been seeing for fans so much of a boost in terms of the MLS specifically. Sponsorship revenue is up double digits compared to last season already. Tickets, stadium projects, so much that's being done to invest in the league. As someone that's played in the league and had such a tremendous career in it as well, I'm curious your thoughts on how the MLS can best utilize some of these, revenue opportunities to continue to grow the MLS.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. I mean, look, I think I always talk about I was able to see MLS 1.0 for better or for worse. I signed out of high school with the league in 1998, and the league at that point was 2 years old, right? And so I got to play in it, go away for a decade and a half, and come back to play in it again. And then now, as I sit here, I'm an investor owner in the Houston Dynamo and Houston Dash, and so I've gotten to see MLS on a multitude of sides. And I just think utilizing the popularity, the desire for people to want to invest in the league on all fronts is being heavily taken advantage of in the best possible way. And so, when we talk about having so much soccer here in our own backyard, and it could be, it's so many different competitions, that only ultimately is going to help the domestic product, because what happens is, and in a good way, when the World Cup comes and all those things, all these tournaments happen, they then end, right? There's always an end point, no matter how much excitement. But what does stay is the domestic league and MLS. And so we're seeing that. And so with U.S. Soccer and American Airlines, you see that investment. You see how much it means to not only them, but to provide that for the fans. And the fans are for me, the fans are the bedrock of any soccer community, team, country. And ultimately, I don't play the game anymore. So I tell people and they laugh, but I am a fan. I'm a fan of the game. I like to go enjoy it just like everybody else.
As we saw you come out of retirement back in 2020, so we know it could be possible, Tim. I will say, though, in all seriousness, now that you are done playing and you are an investor and owner, you're so involved as an analyst, different roles you wear and had to wear, I should say. When you look at the next generation's opportunities for development, what do you think really is the best pathway? There's been so much rolled out, starting even on the youth soccer side, to try to get the pathway to the pros a little bit easier in that sense. What do you think realistically needs to be done to help in the development of especially youth soccer, but also just soccer in general within the United States?
I think we still have a ways to go. I have a daughter who is my everything, and she is going to play at the University of Tennessee next year. And so I've seen not only my own pathway, but her pathway as well. And it's not easy for young boys and girls, because I think we still have a long way to go. Loads of kids play soccer. I mean, more kids play soccer in this country than any other sport, and there's a lot of money going into it, but it's not always done in the right way. So from an infrastructure standpoint, we have to get better at the grassroots level. We need to invest in better coaching. But ultimately, again, my part in that is the money's there. The money's there, the hunger is there, and so we just have to continue to tweak it and mold it and shape it because we have incredible athletes in this country, as we know, and there's a desire to play the game of soccer. Most of my friends who are former professional athletes that played football and basketball, they're pushing their kids into soccer. So the desire is there for the game of soccer. So we need to keep getting better. So as you mentioned, to create that pathway to the professional level because it's there.
Definitely. And as we wrap up, last question I have for you in this final minute. In addition to being a proud girl dad, being an investor and owner, even your partnership with American Airlines, what's next for you on the business side? I feel like you've really diversified your portfolio. Anything else in terms of business ventures, Tim, that you're looking to get your hands into?
Probably a few that are at the early stages that I can't quite mention yet. But I think certainly in the private equity sector, there's a lot of growth, a lot of excitement around the game of soccer, and people are willing to put money towards that because they understand it's a smart investment. So with my experience in the game, both as an analyst and a former player and owner, I think I have, I've had a bunch of conversations surrounding what that looks like and investment through private equity funds into the game. And so, it's certainly a path that I'm looking to go down even further. And I'm already a bit down that road. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the game of soccer makes me really happy and excites me. But to see other people hungry for it, that's where the true passion lies.
So basically what you're saying is we'll have to have you back on once that news becomes a little bit more official. So
absolutely. Anytime I'm on for sure.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for jumping on to talk about all the great work that you're doing and even just your thoughts on the growth of the game, because you're one of the greatest to ever don the red, white, and blue, to play in the MLS and to play internationally. And such a pleasure to have you on to weigh in on the growth of soccer as well as your partnership with American Airlines. So Tim Howard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, our thanks to Tim Howard for joining us. And coming up next, should Pete Rose have been reinstated after a lifetime ban? Renee and I play a little game of buy or sell. That's next. And welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today with Renee. I'm Baker. And Major League Baseball removed Pete Rose and shoeless Joe Jackson from the league's permanently ineligible list this week. That after they were banned for life for gambling on the game. Now, the historic decision by Commissioner Rob Manfred says that Rose's lifetime ban ended with his death and would finally allow him to be considered for induction into the Hall of Fame. But obviously, there's a lot of controversy surrounding this. So, Renee, buy or sell, lifetime bans should expire when you do. That's be morbid.
Oh,
but
man.
Still.
I think I'm going to sell on this, actually. It's interesting because I know Ken Rosenthal came out, MLB writer, great reporter, saying that he wondered if this is political, especially since Donald Trump came out saying, President Donald Trump said he was going to pardon Pete Rose. But honestly, I feel like for Rob Manfred, he's trying to cover himself up a little bit here by saying he's not directly reinstating Pete Rose. He just put out a policy that once you are no longer living and you pass away, then you are okay to be removed from the permanently eligible list because it is only while you're alive. And he even said while you're alive, you're a threat to the integrity of baseball, which I don't know how that changes when you pass. I don't even know what that means. That's weird to me. So the threat's gone when you pass, apparently. I just think that before Pete Rose's death, specifically looking at him and not the other 16 that were also reinstated, they had tried repeatedly to get him reinstated and said he hadn't shown any credible evidence of a reconfigured life. He hadn't shown improvement. So now that he's passed, he suddenly improves. I'm all for grace, but I think when you look at who Pete Rose is in terms of baseball, that's one thing, but in terms of who he is all outside of the game, the character issues, all the legal issues, tax evasion, the relationship with a minor, it's concerning. It's just a lot to process here. Sports betting is now legal, so I understand pardoning for that. But to me, Pete Rose specifically, such a controversial figure.
Well,
I don't know.
If you do this, I guess in theory, you're opening up the door to anybody else, be it Barry Bonds, anybody else that once they pass, then
suddenly
everything,
you're fine.
All the transgressions that they had when they were alive are somehow in the clear, and you're not sort of taking those still into account at the end of the day. And I'm with you. I think if you are banned during your physical life, maybe you still should be banned in your afterlife, which then gets to our next buy or sell question, Renee. Pete Rose will be in the Hall of Fame. What do you think?
Sell on that also.
Really?
I mean, honestly, the running argument has been guys should not be penalized for things like PEDs because the league allowed them to still play. And if the league was able to benefit off of them playing and the booming industry of what baseball was in that era, they should be considered. They also have said, again, sports betting and gambling is now illegal. Of course, you can't gamble on your own games, Pete and Shoeless. But I think it's bigger than who you are as a baseball player. The BBWAA has said voting is based on players' records, playing ability, integrity, sportsmanship, character, and contributions to the team or teams they played on. Pete Rose, again, when you look at the long list, the allegations of that sexual relationship with a 15-year-old girl in the 70s, the 5-month prison sentence for tax evasion in 1990, betting on baseball, tipping off people, it's a lot there to unpack, and there's more beyond even that list. So no, I don't think he should be a Hall of Famer. I think the all-time hits king, 3 World Series, looking at the 2 Gold Gloves, the list goes on and on. MVP, he has tremendous records he's accomplished in baseball, but he's also got records outside baseball.
And by the way, just clarification, Barry Bonds hasn't been banned, obviously, for anything as well.
Good
but
call.
It's just another interesting sort of character in Major League Baseball's history. Buster Olney at ESPN actually proposed this idea. Pete Rose gets into the Hall of Fame, but there's obviously an asterisk at the bottom of his plaque that mentions the last that he was banned. Do you sort of feel like that is the way to sort of get around this? You get these people for all of their achievements on the field in the Hall of Fame, but people still are know what's going what
so like
took
a Hall of Fame criminal clause. Like you're in the Hall of Fame, but you're like on the dark side of the Hall of Fame. So you like the asterisk.
I'm going to say bye, but I do feel like you need to give people some sort of notice about what took to get this person in there, and give them the opportunity to sort of decide whether or not they deserve to be there.
Well, he would need to earn at least 12 of 16 votes to be inducted into Cooperstown, and that would not happen until winter of 2027 at the earliest. So we have some time to see if others are buying on that as well.
Speaking of buying, guys, let's see what's over bubbling at the water cooler today. Jersey sales in Chicago for the White Sox. They normally aren't top sellers, which of course makes sense for the team coming off the worst record in baseball history. But one Sox jersey that is selling like hotcakes is for somebody that doesn't even play for the team. It's Pope Leo. His fake jersey has been popping up all over Chi-Town, selling for over $200 a pop at some stores. One store actually said they've been selling hundreds of them, and they say Paul Konerko is okay with his retired number 14 being used on the jerseys.
I mean, as John Legend says, even when I lose, I'm winning. That's like new meaning to this. But I love the fact that it's giving the White Sox something to clamor about. He's also been asking people, are you a Cubs fan or are you a White Sox fan, before giving out autographs. So he's leaning fully into his White Sox fandom, and it's really paying off in jersey sales.
Konerko is getting blessed in the next life. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of Front Office Sports Today. We'll see you back here tomorrow.